I spent 50 years holding the human brain in my hands. I could repair a ruptured aneurysm with microscopic, perfect precision. Yet, while I was busy saving strangers on the operating table, I allowed my own family to slowly bleed out at home.
I wish I could explain to you the silence of the operating room at 3 in the morning. It is a specific kind of quiet, heavier than anywhere else on earth. For 40 years, that silence was my sanctuary. I remember the ritual of it more vividly than I remember my own wedding vows. The smell of betadine, the rough texture of the scrub brush against my skin, the way the world narrowed down to a 4-inch square of illuminated tissue under the microscope. You see, in that room, I wasn't just a man. I wasn't a husband who forgot to take out the trash, or a father who didn't know how to talk to his son about bullies. I was a god. That sounds arrogant, I know, but when you have a stranger's life literally pulsing in your fingertips, when you are the only thing standing between a father of 3 and the grave, the rush is intoxicating. It is the ultimate addiction. I told myself I was doing it for the greater good. That was the lie I repeated every time I missed a birthday, every time I stayed late to chart notes that could have waited, every time I chose a conference in Geneva over a summer vacation in Maine. I convinced myself that my ambition was actually an act of service. I looked at the bank accounts, the tuition payments for private schools, the large house in the suburbs, and I thought, I am a good provider. I thought the currency of love was security. I treated my career like a high-maintenance patient that required constant monitoring, believing that my family was a stable system that would just run on autopilot. I was building a monument to my own competence, brick by brick, surgery by surgery. But I never stopped to check the foundation. I didn't realize that while I was meticulously stitching up arteries to save lives, the delicate vessels that connected me to my own wife and children were slowly, silently atrophy. I was so busy being essential to the world that I became optional to the people who actually shared my last name. The problem with being a surgeon is that you cannot simply turn it off when you walk through the front door. You spend 18 hours a day training your brain to be objective, efficient, and emotionally detached. You have to. If you felt the tragedy of every tumor, you'd never be able to hold the scalpel steady. But I made the fatal mistake of bringing that clinical detachment into my living room. I remember coming home late, smelling of antiseptic and exhaustion, and finding the house in the chaotic state of raising 3 children. Instead of a father, I became a consultant. I assessed the problems of the household with the same cold logic I used for a diagnosis. If my daughter was crying over a broken friendship, I offered solutions. I told her to stop the hemorrhage of tears because it was inefficient. I didn't hold her. I prescribed advice. I treated their emotions like symptoms, annoyances to be managed, fixed, or medicated so I could get back to my rest. My wife became less of a partner and more of a head nurse, someone I expected to have everything prepped and ready for me. I stopped asking her how she felt. I only asked if the tasks were done. We stopped fighting, which I thought was a sign of a good marriage. I know now that silence isn't peace. It's just the absence of pulse. We were roommates drifting through a sterile environment I insisted on keeping clean and quiet. I remember one evening, my youngest son ran into my study to show me a drawing. I didn't even look up from my medical journal. I just pointed to the door and said, "Not now. I'm working." I didn't yell. I was calm. I was precise. I was surgical. And just like that, I cut a nerve. He walked out, and I don't think he ever really walked back in. I thought I was teaching them discipline. I was actually teaching them that they were secondary to my important work. There is a specific moment I keep replaying in my mind, my memento mori, though I felt immortal at the time. It was the night of my induction as Chief of Neurosurgery. It was the pinnacle, the summit, the thing I had climbed 40 years of slippery, blood-slicked ladders to reach. It was a black tie gala, crystal glasses, speeches about my gifted hands and my visionary leadership. I stood at the podium, blinded by the spotlight, accepting a heavy glass trophy that felt like validation for every missed dinner and every weekend shift. That same night was my son's closing night in his high school play. He had the lead role. He had asked me to come months in advance. "It's just one night, Dad," he had said, and I had said yes, I promised. But then the gala date was moved, and the choice was made for me. Or so I told myself. I told him, "This is for my career, which pays for your school. You understand, don't you?" He looked at me with this dull, resigned expression, an expression that haunts me, and said, "Yeah, Dad, I get it." Standing on that stage, receiving the applause of 500 colleagues, I felt a rush of adrenaline. But on the drive home, the high evaporated. I pulled into the driveway of my silent, dark house. My wife was already asleep, or pretending to be. My son's door was closed. I stood in the hallway, still in my tuxedo, holding that heavy glass trophy. I looked at the closed doors of my children's rooms, and the silence wasn't the peaceful silence of the operating room. It was the silence of a tomb. That was the turning point, though I didn't register it then. That was the moment the heart monitor of my family life finally flatlined. There was no alarm, no beeping, no nurses rushing in. Just a quiet death. They had stopped waiting for me. They had learned to survive without my oxygen. I had won the award, but I had lost the audience that actually mattered. I went to bed that night feeling like a king, not realizing I was actually a squatter in my own home, sleeping next to strangers I had forgotten how to know. Retirement didn't arrive like a celebration. It arrived like a diagnosis I wasn't prepared for. When I finally hung up my white coat, I expected a sense of relief, perhaps a feeling of mission accomplished. Instead, I faced the most terrifying thing a surgeon can encounter, a loss of function. For the first few months, I still woke up at 4:30 a.m., my body flooded with cortisol, ready to fight death. But there was no fight. There was only coffee, the morning paper, and a silence in this house that was so loud it made my ears ring. The pager, that device that had dictated the rhythm of my life for decades, was gone. And with it went my relevance. The important people, the hospital administrators, the ambitious fellows, the grateful patients, they all faded away. It turns out they didn't love me. They needed me. And once the need was gone, the phone stopped ringing. I was left alone in this beautiful, sterile museum of a home I had paid for, but never really lived in. But the hardest part wasn't the silence of the phone. It was the politeness of my children. They are adults now, successful, busy. When they visit, which is rare, they sit on the edge of the sofa, checking their watches, just like I used to do. We have clinical conversations. We talk about the weather, the stock market, my health. They ask, "How are you, Dad?" With the same detached professional courtesy I used to show my patients during rounds. There is no warmth, there is no messiness, there is no love, only obligation. I look at my son, now a father himself, and I see a stranger. I try to offer him advice, to bridge the gap, but he looks at me with a wall behind his eyes. I realize now that you cannot perform surgery on a relationship that has been dead on the table for 20 years. I gave them everything money could buy, but I withheld the only thing that actually appreciates in value, my presence. Now, in the twilight of my timeline, I spend a lot of time sitting here, performing an autopsy on my own life. I look at these hands. The skin is thinning, the veins are prominent, and there is a slight tremor now. A tremor that would have ended my career back then. These hands saved thousands of people. I have opened skulls, clipped aneurysms, and removed tumors the size of golf balls. I have literally held human thought and memory in my palms. But as I sit here surrounded by my awards and my clean glass shelves, I have to ask myself, what was the cost? I used to believe that legacy was what you built. It was the wing of the hospital named after you, the techniques you published, the lives you extended. But I was wrong. That isn't legacy. That is just history. And history fades. The patients I saved, they are grateful, yes, but they went on to live their lives, and eventually they will die too. They don't think about me at the dinner table. They don't miss me on Christmas morning. The true legacy is what you leave in the hearts of the people who sleep under your roof. I traded that legacy for the applause of strangers. I realize now that I was a master at saving lives, but a failure at living one. I treated my life like a medical emergency, always rushing, always fixing, always prioritizing the crisis over the chronic needs of my family. I thought I had infinite time to fix the relationships at home. I thought, I'll make it up to them after residency, then after I make chief, then after I retire. But time is the one thing you cannot synthesize in a lab. You cannot stitch a childhood back together. You cannot resuscitate a marriage once the oxygen has been cut off for too long. I am a man who conquered the brain, the most complex organ in the universe. Yet I failed to understand the simple, beating heart of my own home. I know many of you watching this are in the middle of your own residency, whatever that looks like for you. You are building, climbing, grinding. You feel the pressure to provide, to succeed, to be someone. You tell yourself that the long hours are necessary sacrifices. You tell yourself that your family will understand because you are doing it for them. I am not here to judge you. I am here to warn you. I know the seduction of being needed by the world. I know the high of professional success, but I am telling you from the finish line that the applause stops. The lights go out. And when they do, you don't want to be standing alone on the stage. If I could go back and scrub in for one last operation, I would operate on my priorities. In medicine, we use triage to decide who gets treated first. We prioritize the most critical cases. I want you to triage your life differently than I did. Stop treating your work like the emergency and your family like the stable patient who can wait. It is the opposite. Work is rubber. If you drop it, it will bounce. Family is glass. If you drop it, it shatters. Start small. Put the phone away when you walk through the door. Look your partner in the eyes, not through them. Listen to your child's story about a rock they found with the same intensity you would give a CEO. Do not save your best energy for strangers and bring your leftovers home to the people you love. Go home. Be there. Not just physically, but with your spirit. Do not wait until you are 80 years old to realize that the most important title you will ever hold is not doctor or director or CEO. It is dad.
The scalpels are dull now, and the operating theater is dark. But the silence in this empty house is the loudest sound I know. Do not wait until the autopsy of your life to find the cause of death. Save the patient that matters before the time of death is called.